If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Don't believe me? Here's 5 reasons why. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. 3, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. 4, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And 5, it's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Counter Narrative Podcast, a show designed to change the way we talk and think about education. By sharing stories of successes and triumphs, we aim to challenge the dominant narrative that often negatively portrays our disenfranchised populations. I'm your host, Charles Williams, an urban educator for more than 15 years, a current school principal in Chicago, an educational consultant, an equity advocate, and the co-host of Inside the Principal's Office. Let's get started. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to tell you about a super exciting event that I have coming up, and I would love for you to be in attendance. As I mentioned in the intro to the show, I am the co-host of Inside the Principal's Office, a web series that runs live on the first and third Saturday of each month. During the show, my co-host Michael McWilliams and I bring on other educational leaders and discuss the most pressing issues and topics facing us today. We also have a Facebook group where educators can connect and learn from each other. Well, this summer, we're planning to host an event where we can get together in person. That's right, not another Zoom or a Google Meet, but live. Even better, it's only $35. So join us in Dallas for a networking reception on Friday, July 30th, followed by a day of activities on Saturday, July 31st. Stop by our Twitter page, join us on Facebook, or check out an upcoming episode for more information. I look forward to finally meeting you. Before we jump in, please allow me to apologize. Traci and I had a few recording issues which we'll probably hear during this episode, and which resulted in the late release. I urge you, however, if the audio does bother you, to push through because we were able to work out the kinks and it gets much smoother. Additionally, this is a very powerful episode, one that should be heard by all educators. All right, here we go. In this episode, I chat with Dr. Traci Nicole Smith, a current college instructor, but a former public school teacher, instructional coach, and director of special education, who has transformed the lives of countless families for over 2 decades through her educational expertise and intuitive wisdom. In 2020, she created the Institute for Conscious-Driven Living to assist individuals in helping healing professions learn how to identify triggers, heal core wounds, balance energies, and elevate their vibrations. Rather than react, Traci teaches others how to use external triggers as an avenue for deep inner healing to live a more liberated and authentic life. She resides in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is a nationally recognized city known for its school reforms and public education, yet is still struggling with its own issues. During our episode, Traci dropped plenty of truth bombs and did not hold back. In fact, if you're listening to this in your car, I want to warn you that much of what she says may result in you wanting to stand up and applaud. For obvious reasons, I ask that you refrain from doing so. If you are listening to this in a public place, however, feel free to do so and then direct those who are staring at you back to this episode. I'm sure they'll thank you later. Our focus for this episode was the toxic positivity that infiltrates teacher spaces and does much more harm than good. Traci wastes no time attacking those ideologies and behaviors that we have come to accept as normal, but then question why we are tired, unhappy, and struggling. Take a listen and then find a way to make your own joy. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Counter Narrative Podcast. Always excited to have all of you here with me. By all of you, I have no idea how many are listening, but I'm hoping that those numbers continue to grow. And for those of you who are coming back, thank you so much for your commitment to joining us here every week. So today I have a guest on the show. Again, I know I've been saying this a lot with a lot of guests that we've shared spaces together. But it really goes to one of the things that I'm trying to do is that really connecting with other educators. And maybe this has something to do with Matt's book, The Power of Connections, or just my own drive to say, hey, you know what? It's not enough to share spaces with you, to sit in the same Twitter chat or the same Voxer group or whatever it may be. I want to connect and to learn and grow from you. So Traci, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Survived my 4th of July all night fireworks, and I'm doing great.
Yes, I know you were sharing with me that they were going off all night long. Same over here, and we have people investing large sums of money, and so the displays are incredibly beautiful. But it's like seriously, it's 2 a.m. I need to go to sleep now.
That was my sentiment. And I feel that it was less about 4th of July and maybe more about just celebrating that we're beginning anew again. And people are starting to kind of poke out of their turtle shells and look around and see what's new in the world.
This is very true. You're absolutely right. It was, being at events and things like that. Like we have a principal conference coming up in Chicago. And my wife said, I was like a little kid. I was like, babe, my friends are coming. My friends are coming. And it's just this excitement about being able to reconnect in person and not through a computer.
Absolutely. And what I'm looking forward to is, like you said, we share spaces with a lot of amazing educators. Now that the educational conferences are going to be live and in person, actually being able to be in physical presence of so many people that I admire, respect, and learn from really just warms my heart. And it brings a level of joy to my soul that is so difficult to explain, because I really have, over the last 18 months, connected with so many amazing human beings. And it's just so uplifting, especially in the time of the pandemic when there was so much tragedy and loss.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Traci, I know you and I have shared some spaces together. One of the things that I love the most about you is that you're from New Orleans. And I hate to say it that way because that's not like the best aspect of you, but I love New Orleans. And so so if you could do us a favor, just share a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing in education, maybe, your journey there, and the favorite thing of mine, something interesting about yourself.
Okay, sure. But I want to piggyback for a second on what you said about New Orleans, just because just yesterday I listened to an interview with John Goodman. And he is from Roseanne, and he's an actor that's been on the big screen as well. And he has lived in New Orleans for the majority of his adult life. And he was actually being interviewed by Hoda Kotb, who was an anchor here before she moved to New York and became Hoda and Jenna. So she has also a satellite radio show, and she was interviewing him, and she was asking him like how to explain New Orleans. And I loved what he said, and she loved what he said. He said there's something about certain people, it's in their DNA. When they get to New Orleans, it just fills in the gaps in their DNA, and you just connect to this city on like a cellular level. And so I loved that you love New Orleans, because I feel like that's what you must have done. You must have really connected with the heartbeat of this city. And the heartbeat of this city is so much what I'm about because we love life, we love people, we love music, we love culture, we love architecture, we love art, and we love just being in the present moment and enjoying life. And so, thank you so much for giving my city a shout out because I really honestly, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of is being from New Orleans.
Well, from my experiences, you definitely should be, and I love how you said that with John. Well, what John said, right? The idea that it fills, there's that something, and it fills that up, and it really does. It's hard to explain, but there's a connection, like a drawing, like it allures you back to them, and maybe that's what it is. We have. I will be honest. We have often had conversations about when we look at relocating, in a few years here, like New Orleans is definitely one of the places on our list because it just feels right.
Absolutely. And so I actually lived here my entire life except for Katrina. For 3 years, I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. And in 2008, I really just felt that something was missing in my life. And it was New Orleans, and it was the people, and it was the culture, and it was just the day to day heartbeat. So I moved back here. And just a little bit about my background. I was on the counseling track, and from the time I was a little kid, like 3 years old, I was counseling people in preschool and helping people. I was just born to help and serve other people. My little friend in pre-K, Rebecca, was a mess, and I was always trying to like get her in her seat and get her crayons together, and she was just bad, and I love bad. So she was mischievous, and I would be trying to help her. And she was like the light of my life in preschool. And then I had a friend in first grade, EB. EB was just like Rebecca. She had her little hair sticking up, and I was always trying to brush her hair. And so I always loved just helping other people. And this just became a natural pathway for me to serve in some way. But when I got into the counseling program, I realized that counseling is what happens after. And I wanted to really be before everything. And so I said, well, I don't know if I really want to sit
Mm.
around and talk about people's problems all day. And then I became a teacher, and I sat around and I talked about people's problems all day. So the hubris of Traci Nicole Smith trying to avoid her fate, she sealed it. But I taught preschool special education, self contained, kindergarten inclusion. My entire teaching career for the 9 years was in early childhood setting. And then when I got a job, because of the Obama stimulus money, I worked on a lot of grant funded positions and programs. I got a job and I was placed in middle school. And I previously would have never pictured me to love middle school. I loved middle school. And for 12 years, I served as a elementary, middle, and high school coach. And then the pinnacle of my career, I was able to join a startup as a director of special education. And I was able to build my own program. And that was just amazing. Meanwhile, I also was able to get a PhD in special education. I graduated in 2013, and I became a college instructor for 18 years. And currently, I'm at Ball State University in their special education program. Meanwhile, I started teaching at the community college level about 6 years into my career. And I've done that now for 18 years, but I've transitioned to the university level. And I'm currently an instructor at Ball State University in their autism program, and I love it. So my career has been really full. I've worked with children, I've worked with families, I've worked with adults, and I just have been absolutely fulfilled with this choice of mine to serve my community in the way that I have.
So Tracy, I have to ask, did you say Ball State University?
So, prior to everyone having to learn remote learning, Ball State has a program in Muncie, Indiana, that is an asynchronous online graduate school. So even though they have like 100,000 undergraduates, it's where David Letterman went. So that's why everyone knows it. But basically, they have these online programs. So I've actually had students in Saudi Arabia, Greece, all over the world, and I've been able to be there for 6 years. So the remote learning really wasn't like a curveball for me because I've done it since 2015.
Well, the reason I asked, because when you said it, I was like, wait, did she say Ball State? Because I was originally accepted. I was going to go to Ball State. And then I found out I was going to be a father. So that kind of changed plans there. And then Ball State re entered my life because they were the charter holder for the first school where I was a principal. And so I was like, wait, is it possible? It's the same Ball State, but it is. That's amazing.
It is. I love synchronicities like that when it's just like things line up and you realize, like, wow, people have these shared experiences or these like quote unquote coincidences. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so I'm wondering, it, could you share one thing that is interesting or that may surprise us that maybe not a lot of people know about you?
well, I thought about what would be really interesting about me. And I think it was my number one bucket list item that is now no longer possible unless I can go somewhere and find a way to do it. But, when in my like plight to be unique and eccentric and authentic, my number one goal in life before I transition was to kiss Shamu,
Mm,
the big killer
okay.
whale. And now it's not possible for me. So now I'm going to have to find another really odd, eccentric, cool bucket list item. So that might be an ellipsis, like dot, 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 unless you know of a place where I can go and like hug a killer whale and kiss him on the
Yeah,
nose.
no, I do not. I was going to say, I was driving back from Savannah, apparently in Chattanooga at their massive aquarium that they have there. Um, or no, I'm sorry, in Atlanta it was because Atlanta has the massive aquarium. Um, they have a whatchamacallit, a cage diving experience. So you're able to kind of dive down into this cave, not cave, I'm sorry, in a cage, where the sharks and the whale sharks that they have. And I was like, I pointed it out to my wife. I was like, babe, like I know you're terrified of doing it in the ocean, but like there, it's like a controlled, I guess, if you will, environment. So I don't know. Maybe if you're looking for a substitution.
I mean, I feel like that could be a good possibility because there's something that's so cute about those big shamus. And I know that Shamu ate his trainer and it ended up in tragedy. But I would like to think that, I have so much positive energy that the whale would not want to eat me. He would want to like hang out with me or let me like ride on him or do something fun.
There you go. There you go. Like, hey, this person is so amazing. They're my new best friend.
Exactly. Me and the killer whale.
I think there was a movie about that.
Was
Free
there?
Willy. That's
Oh, you're
just
right.
imagine you standing on the break wall with your arm up and, Shamu jumping over.
I'm telling you, that's I still want to do it, but I'm starting to put together my bucket list for the last third of my life. And definitely just doing something that's fun and adventurous like that people say jumping out of planes or zip lining or there's so many little daredevil things that people do, but I had to have something that nobody in the world would ever have.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely something different. I like that approach.
Yes, I mean, why do it? Everyone, anyone can jump out of a plane, right? Wrong. But
Yeah, we have the
but
capacity to. I don't know how many of us are actually going to.
well, I was watching like the Hoda and Jenna show the other day with my grandmother, and I guess to honor her late grandfather, Jenna Bush,
Yes.
out of an airplane, and I was like, that woman has my
Yeah, and
respect.
she was terrified. I
Yeah.
mean, understandably, but I was watching it. In fact, my car was being repaired, so I was in the waiting area, and I was that exact one, and I was like, "Props to you! Like you were terrified, but you went through with it." So,
I mean, isn't it funny? When I was in graduate school, there was a guy in my class that was so terrified of giving a presentation in front of the class that he got up and said, I have to pee, and ran out of the class and never came back. And it's just so funny. Like some fears, like I actually can really understand because you have like no control when you're worried, like, is your chute going to open? But speaking in front of adults, they people really rank that high
mhm.
up there on their list of like most fearful acts.
Yeah, it is. It is one that, yeah, yeah. I mean, like for some of us, right? This is what we do, right? As teachers, we do it all the time, which I find even funnier that there are teachers who will do that in a classroom, right? 180 days out of the school year, and then you ask them to give a presentation to their colleagues, and they're like, "Oh no, 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 no!" Like I was like, "Wait, you do this all the time?" I guess it's a different format, but I don't know.
I mean, I feel like in a way, I guess people worry about how they might come across or like being judged or anything, but it's really never bothered me. But I also hold space for people that it really terrifies them.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. There are things I guess phobias are interesting, because it does, right. They terrify some people, and then for others they're like, "What do you mean? Wrapping the snake around me is absolutely nothing."
Oh my gosh, it's so funny that you would say that because being New Orleans and New Orleans is anything goes, and I mean anything goes. I cannot tell you how many times I've been to a bar or walking down the street in New Orleans and people have snakes wrapped around
Oh,
them.
yeah.
It's just something people do here. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going out. It's like you and your best friend, the snake.
It's like, yeah, yeah. I have my ball python wrapped around my neck right now as a scarf, but I can't give that presentation.
Yeah,
So so
exactly.
Tracy, I want to jump in here, and obviously the idea behind this podcast is trying to counter, right, to push back against these narratives that dominate educational spaces and other spaces. But I'm curious, in your time in education, in your experiences, what are some of the ways that has really stood out to you where you have seen that narrative being challenged or countered?
Well, I can tell you the most prominent day of my life in education was when Donald Trump won office and everybody in my entire school showed up to work crying their eyes out. It was nobody slept. It was the worst day of everyone's life. And I taught at the time, where I was the director of special education, but I say teach because I'm always a teacher. I was at the charter school and we had mostly minority
Mm.
students, and a lot of students are not in this country
Hmm.
legally that were in our school. And so somehow not being in the big school district and being in the smaller charter school felt less intimidating to the families. So we were told by the administration, which I was a part of the administrative team, that we were not allowed to discuss it with the children and that we had to provide instruction and that we had to pretend as if nothing happened. And this was even more devastating. This is like you have been through like the worst trauma of your life, and somebody's telling you to pretend it didn't
Yeah.
happen. So everybody was like stunned, and I was not included in the conversation. And I think it's because the administration knew that I would be like, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to stand up here and be there with you. Hello? So when we were told that we were not allowed to say anything, once the kids showed up and got off the bus, they ran off the bus. They were so filled with fear. And a lot of them were saying and asking questions about deportation and are they going to come and arrest my parents and take me away? And there was absolutely no way that we could adhere to the instructions of pretend this didn't happen.
All right. You're like, wait, what are
So
you talking about? What happened?
right. And I know right now there's a lot of like parallels between what I'm saying and kind of like all the things that happen in the news and what's going on with what you can and can't teach in schools, what you can and can't discuss in classrooms, what is and isn't history. So it's the same thing. And for me, I did not think about my job or getting in trouble or anything along those lines. To me, I was not Traci Nicole Smith, the director of special education. I was a human being and I was devastated. And what made me even more devastated was that I could not assure these children that they were not going to be taken away from their parents, that they were not going to have people knocking at their door because I didn't know. And so you have to be honest with the children. You know, they were 12 to 17 years old, and you have to be honest with them. I don't know what's going to happen. And we all grieved together, and nobody got in trouble for it. But it was one of those things where it's very easy to say to people not to comment on something because you're afraid of what it's going to unearth. But on the other side of it, if you don't address it, then it paints out a whole different picture of the school doesn't care and the teachers don't care. It would have caused even more divisiveness. The best part is that once we got the grieving over and everybody kind of settled down, that it actually brought us together as a community. And it was never spoken of after. So the administration did not come down on anyone. I think they realized that we did the right thing by stopping instruction and just having a day to grieve.
So there are two different things here that, and I would love to try to venture down. I don't know if we could do them simultaneously or if we're going to have to kind of hop back and forth, whatever it may be. But you bring up two great points. The first one, like you said, there are these parallels right now in education about, well, what are we allowed to teach and what aren't we allowed to teach? It's even more than just an administrator saying, I don't like this. I don't think this is a good idea to be taught in the school. This is literally becoming laws, right? Where states are saying you are not allowed to talk about these things, which to me just baffles my mind because that's what we're as educators supposed to do, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if you saw, but DeSantis down in Florida now has said that, you know, in colleges that the students and the faculty have to announce their political positions so that way they could be assured that they are not, you know, kind of being indoctrinated into other political ideologies. And it's like, wait, like this is the whole point of education. So that was one thing that you mentioned, right? This idea of being controlled on what we're allowed to talk about. And then there's this other idea of saying, out of fear, we're going to pretend like things aren't happening. We're going to not address it. We're going to just continue moving on as if nothing is happening, but ignoring this very real and very needed SEL component where we can say, look, we need to pause instruction because if we push through, nothing is going to happen. And so we definitely need to address the trauma that is happening in our spaces right now. And so I'm curious which of these, you would like to dive down, kind of go down that path a little more, because this is the reality of what's happening in our educational system today.
Well, I will address both of them. And the first topic that you bring up, it's actually probably why I left the K-12 setting. And so I entered the K-12 setting in the late 90s. And I know it sounds like the same broken record, but over time, I felt the joy being eclipsed from my life by being a part of the school system and by constantly being told and mind control and dominated, and we're not doing this and we're not doing that. And even though we know it's best for kids to have the arts, we can't afford to do the arts. And if kids can't read, why would you want them to learn to paint? And all of these things that I actually didn't believe were being mandated upon me. And everybody is different. And so one of the things that I love about Twitter is that I have been able to connect with so many people who want to fight the good fight, and they have so much battle left in them, and they are just ready to take it on. For me, I was way past that, being over 2 decades. And for me, I could not take another day in that setting anymore. So I said, you know what? There's other ways that I can contribute. And I can't worry about people, like people literally, lawyers, doctors, engineers. Some people would say to me, you can't leave. Like, what about the kids? And I would say, well, why don't you quit your $300,000 a year job and get certified as a teacher, because we need you. I've served for over 2 decades. So I agree. We need the best and the brightest. We need you. And it was like crickets, because I'm not going to be shamed or guilted into, distrusting my gut instinct that it was time for me to go. And it was time for me to just do college and not be in the K-12 setting. So for people who are on the front lines, I can honestly say that I have every situation is so different. Every state is different. Every town is different. Every individual building is different. I would tell anyone who is questioning whether or not like they are up for this or what they should do to really look at how it's affecting their life. I found that just because of my personality and the way that I am, it's like I am wholeheartedly into something, and I put my whole heart and soul, and it becomes a part of my being. And so when I just found that decision after decision continued to dehumanize and devalue children, and to make them test scores and standards and benchmarks and all of these constructs that we've created that aren't even real,
Mm-hmm.
I started carrying that into my personal life, and I was not able to have the balance anymore. And certain things happened that let me know that the universe, God, the higher power was telling me, you don't have to do this anymore, my child. You have served your community. You can do other things, because I don't want you to be miserable. And I felt that message come through me very strongly. And so if you still have fight in you, if you can still wake up every day, if you have good boundaries and you have balance, and when you're off, you can enjoy your life and your family, and you're not sacrificing all that just to be a teacher, I say, stay in it and find a way to make it work for you in your situation. And if you can't, that there are other avenues that you can serve your community and other ways that you can be an educator, that you don't have to do something that is literally like tearing apart the fabric of your soul.
Traci, I want us to sit in that for a second, because I'm so happy that you are speaking this absolute truth. That it is okay not to be okay. And I've had this conversation with many teachers who have sat in my office and said, I can't do it anymore, and they're expecting a reprimand for me or my disappointment. And I've said that's okay, right? Because if you can't show up and be 100% for your students, then you're doing a disservice not only to them, but to yourself. So it is absolutely okay to recognize when it comes time that this is no longer the space I need. But the fact, like you pointed out, there are so many other ways to serve your community. There are so many other ways to serve the field of education outside of the classroom, and you have to recognize when the time is right.
Absolutely. And the problem with me wasn't that I wasn't doing what's best for kids or giving 100%. It's that the balloon was empty with nothing in it. There was no air for me, for my joy. And I have a right to experience joy and bliss in my life. And I am very unapologetic about that. And I feel that people who sacrifice their sanity for the sake of quote selflessness, that is insane. That is the insanity cycle, and that is punishing yourself for no reason. We have to have joy in our life. We are here to experience joy. And obviously, there are situations and times in your life. I can think about Hurricane Katrina. Our city is destroyed, and there's so many judgmental, like, they're wonderful, beautiful people, but there were so many people who said the worst things that I've ever heard anyone say to anyone in my life to me about New Orleans and Katrina, and God made Katrina to kill all the gay people in New Orleans, and just crazy stuff that I had to absorb. So for me, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, I know that it is my God-given right to experience joy, and I am giving all of my joy and everything to these children, and there is nothing left for me. So the empty cup club is like clapping their hands, like, look at you, you're giving everything of yourself. And the people who are like, the cup should be filled, fill your cup first, are like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. I'm imagining right now, like you speaking, and the listeners are just like standing up, like, yes, yes, Traci. And to all of the administrators who are about to receive letters of resignation, I'm sorry. But like, it's one of those things that we, right, as administrators, as leaders, have to be mindful of those environments that we are creating for our teachers and our students, that if our teachers are running on empty, we need to be aware of that. We need to be cognizant of that and find ways not to have them running on empty, or find ways to refill them, which comes back to that SEL, which I think for us is a great transition to that other side, is this idea of just saying, nope, we're going to pretend like nothing is happening. We're just going to keep pushing because the state says we've got this assessment, we've got these standards to cover, we have to hit a certain score, right? Those are the things that are important. But like you said, when you took the time to say, nope, we're going to pause all of that. We're not going to focus on any of that. We're going to connect as human beings on the other end. It was so much better. And so I'm curious if we could just touch on that a little bit more, because I think that is one of those root issues of why there are so many educators who are feeling empty and who are going through the motions, who are showing up day in and day out, just kind of going through it and saying, this is no longer fulfilling for me. So I was wondering, could we touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Recently, I've been elected as a board member to the Human Restoration Project, and many of the listeners will probably have heard of it, but it's basically restoring humanity in education. It's looking at progressive education and like experiential learning or ungrading and all of these sort of concepts that are not necessarily popular, but they're very student centered. And it's kind of almost like you're saying that education doesn't have to be sterile, and the way that it's become. I'm so proud of being a board member because I love grassroots organizations that are just trying to use research and like real life scenarios and different situations that are like very like action research in the classroom, or even like big, applied research studies to make changes, because it's one thing to be a complainer and a victim and sit in that lack consciousness. It's never going to change. And, I'm miserable, but this is the way it is. And it's a whole nother thing when you switch into that creator energy and that abundance energy, and you join with like-minded people who say, yes, we can acknowledge that the water is freezing and it's deep, but I'm not going to just keep talking about the temperature. I'm going to find a way to swim. I'm going to find a way to get to the shore. And so for me, it's, you have to find something that you're passionate about outside of your husband, your children, your job, that really brings you joy. And it can be so simple. One of the things that really brings me joy is watching and listening to birds. Now, I have other things that I do and other mindfulness practices, but I love watching and listening to birds, and it really just puts me in the present moment and it makes me feel joy. And so I think that when you're in a situation where you're being told different scenarios about what you can and can't do. Now, I'm not talking about in states where they have these ludicrous laws. I really haven't processed about what I think about that because it's all very new. But if you're still in a state where you don't have these laws that are really oppressing the truth and trying to suppress trauma, what I love about the Human Restoration Project, they have a website with lots and lots of research. So if you're my principal and I'm going to you and I say, listen, I really want to try ungrading, and this is all the research behind it. Can I try this process in my class? I'm hoping that you're in a situation where you can do something like that in your classroom, and then the before and after, and see the results and see how it brings children so much more of a co-creative power, that they're really creating their own learning environment by not being worried about the big bad grade and just being able to learn for the sake of learning. So that would be my advice to anyone that wants to implement anything in their classroom, is to find organizations that you align with. And hopefully these organizations have practices like, restorative practices. There's a, large community that are now doing restorative practices versus like punishment and suspension and all of these things that schools have traditionally done that we know like keeps kids out of school in the learning environment, and really just like is, on that pipeway to prison, because you're doing punitive and you're not doing replacement behaviors and you're not teaching skills that may not be there. So that would really be my advice to anyone who would want to start trying to do something there in their classroom, because they notice that the environment isn't working for them anymore, and that they're not really aligned to their authentic truth about what they think learning is, and that they're tired of things, but they want to be proactive. They want to learn, and they want to start slowly changing things in their classroom to see if they get different results.
Well, I want to say thank you for sharing that one. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard of it. Maybe I have, and I just don't know. But I'm definitely going to go check that out. And you're absolutely right. These finding, right? I was just speaking with another person, and this is one of the things we talked about was the idea of having that communication, finding out what appeals to those individuals, right? We talk about like the love languages, they have the work languages. And so the idea to say, hey, if your principal is a logic, like, research-based kind of person, to say, hey, look, here's the research behind this thing that I want to do. And hopefully that will appeal to them. I mean, hopefully, I'm just hoping for the listener's sake, like maybe you don't have to go through all of that because your leader is already in that same mindset. Like, no, yeah, I'm glad I have a teacher, right, who's willing to do this work, because that's my own vision as well for this school. So I'm thank you for sharing that resource.
Absolutely. And I think that really people have such limiting beliefs, and they'll say, well, this will never work, or my principal will never go for it, or I have to be at the school because it's, close to my child's school. And like we put all these limitations on us. And I think when you really look to start dismantling these like blocks that you have, we really have the ability to create the life that we want. You have to take small incremental steps, but having limiting beliefs and saying that you can't do something or justifying why you're staying in an environment that's not healthy, all you're doing is preventing yourself from experiencing joy. And you're also allowing fear of the unknown to creep in. So it I always like tell people, I personally, this is just me, nobody else. But if I was 1 year away from retirement and I was absolutely miserable, but it meant the difference of getting like a huge retirement and then like a decent retirement, I would leave. I would not allow myself to be miserable for an entire year just to collect the retirement. And I know some people who have done that and they've been able to go on and supplement their income. And then they had some kind of like unexpected opportunity or windfall or something. And I just think when we have limiting beliefs on what we're able to create in our lives because we've put everything in a neat, convenient box, just own that and say, I don't want to make a change. I'd rather just be miserable. But if you really would not rather just be miserable, then allow yourself to start dismantling these limiting beliefs. And I've left schools because for various reasons, but sometimes it has been there was a misalignment between me and the administrator, and it was just not going to change. And so for me, I want to be in a place where I can be Traci Nicole Smith. And when I can't be Traci Nicole Smith and who I really am, and I can be a rule follower. I mean, I'm a director of special education. I mean, there's so much of that framework that is about like regulations, mandates, laws, like legal. And even if it's like legal, I also like to do things that are morally and ethically correct, not just because they're legal. But my point is that I never judge anyone. If people want to stay in a situation where they're not happy, that's fine. That doesn't hurt me. But when I leave, it's so interesting how people will project their fears onto you or say things. And because I guess I've done so much work on myself and because I'm so mindful, I can always see that a mile away. And, I'm always thinking, this isn't about me. This is about you. But I just smile and okay. And I just allow them to experience their own journey at their own rate. But I don't allow other people to put their limiting beliefs or project things onto me because I have the courage to make decisions sometimes that look a little like, wow, that's not the most logical or rational decision. Yes, but I listen to my intuition, I listen to my gut, and I allow the guidance of God and my higher power in the universe to guide me. And, that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm at the place where I am now.
There are two things, I tried. I had to turn away from the mic because I started laughing out loud. When you were just like, just say it. You want to be miserable. Like, it is such a hard truth to swallow, but there are so many people out there who do that, right? I'm thinking of somebody in my mind. I won't say their names, but who constantly come to me and ask for advice. Or I just listen to them vent and complain, but yet you do nothing to change it. And when there are ideas, right? Well, what if you try this? What if you do this? What if you do that? No. I love this. I think next time I have a conversation with this individual, I'm like, then you're just choosing to be miserable because that is that hard truth. So I love the fact that you said it. I mean, it hurts. It bites when you hear it, but it is a truth. So thank you for that.
Well, I always say there's no honor in being miserable. If you're miserable, it only makes you miserable. And, for me, I don't want anyone to think like, oh, she has it all figured out. Trust me, last year, I figured out that I was in the same exact friendship pattern that you're talking about, where I'm like, writing these blogs and having all these podcast discussions and these deep thoughts about not being in an insanity cycle. And here I am with someone who's like embodying victim consciousness, constantly complaining and not doing anything about it. And I had to just push that person out of my life. And, my thing is, I'm okay with whatever you think of me. That's none of my business. I have to live with how I think about me. And I am not going to allow anyone to abuse me. I will listen. I will be your friend. I will be your advocate. I will hold your hand, but I will not participate in your victimization of your life. We all have power. There are amazing stories about people all over the world that escape the most atrocious situations. And you mean to tell me, like in your middle class life with your, school around the block and you hate your principal, that you can't just go get another job? And it's not that I'm not being compassionate. It's just at some point, I'm an action person. So I'm like, I need to go. I need to do things. Like when I'm unhappy, I make changes. And I know not everyone is like that, but I also don't have to be a witness to that. I don't have to be that thought partner that absorbs your misery. I deserve better than that because I don't do that to you.
Mm, mm, mm. Listeners, I hope you are listening and taking this in, because I think what's happening right now, at least for me, and maybe this is just me, but I doubt it, that Traci right now is, you are saying so many of the things that we are thinking, right? You're saying so many of the things that we have long believed, but we have been taught, I guess, or conditioned in a society that we're not allowed to say or to do those things, right? There's that toxic positivity. And so I'm really glad that you're saying these things, because I know this show talks about challenging that narrative, and that means it's so many different things. It embodies so many different things. And so this idea right now that as educators, we don't have to sit in spaces where we're not valued. We don't have to sit in spaces where, our joy is being robbed of us, or that, you have to be in a situation like we're talking about right now, where we're just being like kind of absorbing, your misery. Like, it is okay for us as educators to stand up for ourselves, to recognize when enough's enough, and to take the actions necessary to make ourselves happy. And I mean, I'll be honest, I'm sure you've seen this. I kind of chuckle right now when I see this issue right within the fast food industry. And it's like, no. There's not a shortage of workers. It's just there's starting to be a time when workers are like, no, treat us right. And I saw this episode the other day on the news where it's like, yeah, well, I guess I'm going to have to raise their wages and maybe give them insurance. Like, wait, like maybe, like we all reach a point when enough is enough. And so I'm really, really glad that you are saying, hey, that's okay. When you've reached that point, it is okay to say enough's enough.
Listen, Traci Nicole Smith is not manifesting illness and being depressed and absorbing other people's pain for people who don't want to make changes in their life. And I'm sitting here and I'm like filtering in all of this stuff. And believe me, this is coming from someone who was like the sponge. So it's not like, oh, yeah, I came out of the womb and I was this wise. No, I went to the school of hard knocks, in the NFL when they don't go to college and they say, how did you get to, the NFL? And they say the school of hard knocks. I did go to college, but I still went through the school of hard knocks. And I had to learn that I deserve what I give. And it's so funny now because of Twitter. And I mean, there's so many people, like I wouldn't even like list names because I would lead someone out and they would be so devastated. But there's so many people that I've met that love me, respect me, honor me, admire me, treat me with joy and space and boundaries and all of these things that I wanted. And it's like that's what I give. And I'm finally, since I've purged all the toxic positivity and all the toxic negativity and all of that out of my life, that I'm now being able to receive what I deserve, which is what I give. And if you have 100% of you and 75% is for the toxic positivity and toxic negativity, how are you going to have 100% joy in your life? And so, and just to touch on what you said about the fast food workers, we can all talk about lazy, entitled people who are sucking off the government. It exists in every state, it exists all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my thing. That is a very small percentage of people. The
Mm-hmm.
majority of people in the world all want the same thing. They want to love their job. They want to be treated with respect. They want a livable wage, and they want to be valued by their employer. When you're paying somebody $5 an hour and they are showing up every day and they're never late and they don't steal from you and they don't gossip and they work their behind off, why in the world are you paying them $5 an hour? So that you can live in a bigger house? Well, guess what? That house is never going to be big enough, because then you're going to want another house that's bigger. Then you're going to want another car, and it's going to be more diamonds, more trips. You're going to be in that whole cycle. So, you should realize that's not going to fulfill you. But what will fulfill you is if you connect with people on a human level and experience the joy of having a team around you of people that you can count on, that are there for the right reason, and that you can actually be generous in your heart and give people what they deserve so that they can go to the movie theater. You want to go to Greece every year. They just want to go to the movie theater and be able to afford popcorn. Can you give them that joy?
Mm, 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 mm. Just truths, Traci. Truths, truths, truths.
I mean, I get crazy when people say teachers are lazy and entitled and they work 3 hours a day. And I don't give that much of my energy, because that's a rabbit hole somebody's trying to take me down to
Mm-hmm.
take me out of my joy. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to allow you to do that anymore. Traci at 25 would be like ballistic. Traci at 50 is much more grounded. But I will say this: every profession, every culture, every gender, every nationality, ethnicity, country has people that are not doing their best. But if they're not doing their best, instead of judging them, maybe you should ask yourself, I wonder why they don't think they're worthy of a good life. I wonder why they don't put their best foot forward. I wonder what happened to them. And maybe it's not my business, but I'm going to pray for them and hold space that they learn self-love and the value of how wonderful it feels when you show up at work and you do your best, and that you have the joy of just knowing that you're living your life to the fullest. So I just try to, not focus on all the people who are not doing the quote right thing in people's eyes, and just know that everybody is showing up here, navigating the world and just doing the best that they can with what they have and the tools they have and their background, and just trying to find their place in the world.
Well, Traci, I want to say thank you. I think I'm going to have to add a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. Like, if you're normally listening to the show while you're driving, maybe for this one, you don't want to be driving, because, as you are like pumping your arms, as you're like, yes, Traci, like, I don't want people swerving around on the roads, or because I definitely feel your passion. I feel your energy, your authenticity about this. And that is what I love about being able to do these shows and connecting with individuals. Like, there's no way I would have ever been able to get this out of you through a Twitter chat. So thank you so much for hopping on with us today.
Well, I just want to say that you are one of several people I know that has such a balanced approach and really has so much respect for other people's journey. You allow everyone to discover their own pathway. We had a conversation earlier before the broadcast started, and it really let me know that you're not trying to be an interloper, an intervener, a controller on other people's path, that you're just focused on your path and processing your own way. And you allow those who are close to you the beauty and the pleasure of discovering their own way. So I just want to thank you because you brought this out in me because of your energy. You have such an amazing energy. And I can tell that you love life and love people the way that I love people and love life. And that's the whole thing, is that life is beautiful and it's what you make of it. We have a lot of work to do, but I'm focused on me and being the best me, because I know that if I focus on Joe Blow on the street, I don't have control over what he does. And that also circumvents my own journey. So I just want to thank you for being such a great, gracious, like amazing person. And I just love the podcast. And I am so blessed that we connected. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Traci, for those kind words. And I hope that the next time I am down in New Orleans, you and I will be able to connect in person and maybe, you know what brings a question, Traci, what is in your aspect? And I know it might be a little hard to choose one. What is for you the quintessential food that somebody would have to have if they came to visit you down in New Orleans?
Well, I'd have to have a few categories. So I'd have to say that if you wanted something that was like fattening and like a breakfast food, it would be beignets. If you wanted to try something that is the staple here, it would be like crawfish, gumbo, etouffee. There's so many things, but just to try the food here that's indigenous to our area. Anything that you try here that's naturally Nolans, as they say. But, people look at crawfish and they're like, oh, I don't know if I could do it. And then they try it and they love it. So, yeah. And I think there is a conference. It's a tech conference that's coming here in 2022. So maybe I can look that up and you can put it in the show notes. But I just want everybody from Twitter to come down to New Orleans and, I'll hook us up with like the best time ever.
There we go. You listeners, Edu Twitter, you have heard it. We are going to find this conference and we are all going to meet, and Traci is going to be our guide. So thank you once again, Traci, for not only being on the show, but for all of the amazing work that you're doing. And even though you have stepped out of that K-12 realm, the impact that you are still having on education has gone unfettered. So I appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for listening to the Counter Narrative Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and of course, share it with friends and family. I'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show, so please leave a comment or two as well. Now, I'm not sure what platform you're using, but the show can be found on Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and plenty of other platforms. If the show isn't on your preferred site, let me know, and I'll be sure to get it up and running. This podcast is also featured on schoolrubric.com, where you can find educational articles, videos, and interviews with educators from around the globe. Be sure to connect with me and other listeners by following the show on Twitter at the CN Podcast and joining the show's Facebook group. Take care.